Cool. We can just jump in.
Yeah.
We can cheers again.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers. We made it.
All right. Thanks for coming onto our podcast. So for those of you guys who don't know, this is Michael with Mile High Fungi. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time. I kind of look up to you guys as like the first mushroom company that is in Denver, and like I don't know. I feel like you carved the path, which makes it easier for me as like an entrepreneur to look up to you guys and be like, you did it, you're doing it, and it's very inspiring. So
yeah, well,
thanks again. And
I appreciate the nice words. I mean, for us, I think it's been just an interesting journey because when we were first starting out, there was a small operation at the Grow House in Denver, but it was, it wasn't like completely like a mushroom-driven project. I mean, the Grow House had such a more big philanthropic mission statement, and mostly it was like aquaponics, and they had like a little tilapia set up and a lot of like bib lettuce and that kind of stuff. And so the little mushroom fruiting chamber that was there was dwarfed in comparison to the other parts of the project. And Liz and I, we've been into mushrooms since we've known each other, which is now like 17 years. It's been a run. But when we moved to Denver, we were like kind of floundering, I guess, for lack of a better term. I mean, I was working with Denver Urban Gardens, and then we both worked in the cannabis industry, and we were like, what isn't being done here, And Liz is like, let's grow mushrooms. I was like, I don't know how to grow mushrooms. Really, I mean, I worked at a spot in Olympia, Washington, when I was in college, where we would like distribute fungi perfecti stuff. And this like 2006, 2005, something like that. So we would do like oyster beds out back and inoculate logs and stuff in a climate where it actually worked. Right? And so we like played around with it. It was more mushroom picking when we were out there. It's just like such an abundant place to pick mushrooms. You just walk a little bit in the forest, and the shanties are popping, whatever. That made it super easy, right? And so then we really entered the rabbit hole. I mean, I don't think there was much less information when we first started. And fortunately for us, some of my best friends from college ended up going on to work for Paul at his Shelton facility. And so between them and then Jimmy Gowan, who's like Paul's right-hand man for forever, we had like people we could lean on, right? We're like, we bought these things off the internet. I got like some, pond foggers. What the fuck are we doing? Wow. And just kind of played with it from there. And then we ended up going out to the facility in Shelton and did one of Paul's coursework thing after we'd been growing for a while, and it was more than anything like validating, right? Yeah. You're like, oh yeah, we do know what we're doing, sort of, So yeah, no, it's been a fun journey, and I think for you guys and everybody else who's kind of playing around with it at this point, I mean, Denver's such a good market for it. Oh, yeah. Both between just like consumer knowledge base. Right? I mean, people are reading up on the beta-glucans and all this stuff before they even come to the farmer's market. Right? Yeah. You don't have to educate anybody per se. And that's changed dramatically over the years, but at the same time, it's also created like a bigger market space. It's like I think when you first reached out, I was still more in my like flexing, you come with this because, you're like, we made this little baby, like, it's my baby, Yeah. But at this point, we're like, more the merrier in many regards because, we share clients and there's just so much room. I mean, mainly we're competing against California and Pennsylvania and other heavy hitters, much less so than like one another. At least I feel that way.
I agree with that. Yeah. I feel it's more of like a family.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like it's cool to be friends with people that are doing the same thing, and that's kind of my philosophy is just grow the family, and then the market kind of follows suit.
Totally. I mean, both Liz and I think in the beginning too, we've seen a lot of like little things start and fail, right? And so, from I don't know, maybe like a time management standpoint, I respond to pretty much every single email that comes in, but a lot of times it's just like, go to YouTube, go to do your research, do this stuff, educate yourself. We don't want to necessarily walk you through the process unless you really want to do it, and let's like get into system design and that kind of stuff, and that's like a whole different tier of people that want to play. But we've been impressed with your ability to create content online. It's like neither Liz nor I are like into that personally, and that's like a full-time job in and of itself, right?
It's like a passion of mine, so I feel like that is like one of the driving forces that I like is just get the word out, and if I can empower people to know how to grow mushrooms, then they're going to tell their friends about mushrooms, and it's just like this constantly growing wheel.
No, I mean, I think it's great, and the amount of people I know that are on those YouTube channels, or they hear about something because they watched TR's channel from forever ago or something. Like, it's like, oh yeah, I didn't really realize that people are watching that, and that exists now, right? Because I mean, I think I go on social media mainly to like numb my mind at the end of the day, less of like, what can I make for social media? Like, well, I haven't posted in 2 weeks. I should post, right? But I mean, it's such a resource, and I think. Also, generationally speaking, I mean, so many people are in that YouTube university, and I think it's empowering, right? I mainly go on because I'm like, I'm looking at this wiring diagram. I'm just going to double check 3 YouTube videos, right? But obviously, you can just use it as an amazing educational tool. So, props to you for kind of taking on that realm, here locally, and I mean, obviously the internet knows no bounds.
Well, I appreciate that. I feel like my latest endeavor, and I'm about to dive in deeper into like breeding mushrooms. So I'm pretty excited about that. And like the more people that I teach about breeding mushrooms is going to lead to like more mushroom strains. Like that's like an insurance policy almost, but then it's also like I said, it's like very empowering for people. I did bring some. I got like these golden oysters that I cloned from the farmer's market from you guys. One of them cracked, but I thought it was really interesting because if you look at the 2 different dishes, this is MEA, so the malt extract, and then this is a PDA plate from like the same exact time, and you can see MEA is exploding. So I wanted to ask you, what types of agar or media do you guys use? Because it's always been a question of mine, is like, is it better to transfer the mycelium onto many different types of medias to keep it rigorous, or is it you use the same one and then it adapts to it and then it learns that media like as a preference to all the rest?
I've only ever used malt extract.
All right.
I mean, really, just like I've never explored it. When I've seen a couple of your videos where you have like the V8 one and whatnot, and you're playing around with it, which is, fascinating, awesome. For us, it's just like, it's been simple, pretty boilerplate, as far as like getting it. I mean, I think more so than anything, the tinkering part of it, I think we've played with less because we've been more focused on like building development, systems development, kind of these other schemes of it. And so I'm always like stoked. I follow like Ryan Paul Gates and his breeding stuff, and Andrew Collier-Reed and your stuff. And I mean, I think it's awesome because there's so much room within the industry to pioneer, to do these different things. And a lot of times I don't have the bandwidth to do more than what I'm currently doing in any given day, right? And so I love that, and it's nice to see all these different ways that people can plug in. whether that be in that realm or whether it's, doing educational work or like what it is that kind of advances the whole field as a whole. And then, we always play around with new strains and we're always swapping. We got a pretty big culture library.
Cool.
But for the most part, we kind of just have like our heavy hitters, We do a Lambert strain for both the Blues and the Phoenix, and we grow 3790 shiitake. And, it's like,
the golden standards.
Yeah, just because I know it works, right? And I have calculatable yields from it, and it just kind of it makes sense for us. But I'm always stoked when people are pushing the envelope and this other thing, and hell, you come up with something great, or somebody else comes up with something great, and then it becomes the industry standard, right? Like, it's so funny. TR casually threw out Masters Mix. I don't know how many years ago it was, like 6-7 years ago. And it was like just this generic thing. He's fucking around telling somebody this. And then it's just like Masters Mix, and he gets people calling him, be like, have you heard of Masters Mix? He's like, fuck me, like, you should have like trademarked that or something.
Yeah, that is definitely like a huge game changer as far as like yields go.
We started on brand. Well, we started on straw, right? And we were doing maybe an All-American or two a week of sawdust blocks. And we were going to these different arborists and getting specific wood chip from them because we read Stammett's book, and you have to have some wood chip and you have to have some raw sawdust. You have to have the brand. And I'm like, this is a lot of work. So you're sourcing this shit, right?
Yeah.
And then now it's just like it's super standardized. We just brought in 10 tons of combo pellets. It's right. Has 7% moisture content. It's 50% oak. It's 50% organic soybean hull. And then we have some friends that work in woodworking or whatnot, and we kind of dilute that. But I know that it will perform well in that regard. And now that we're selling blocks to more people, the issue for me is always like, I'm willing to tinker around when it's my crop, but if somebody's going to buy it and it's going to cost X, I wanted it to perform a certain way.
Reproducibility.
And so as much as we've grown on waste coffee chaff, waste coffee grounds, we've worked with all these different substrates over the years, and really nothing grows quite as well as on this 50-50, except with the maitake. It seems to like a higher rate of oak to soybean hull. So it's like a 70-30 blend. And we haven't played around much with the JC strain of shiitake, which is like the Chinese log shiitake strain. But that apparently does pretty well in like that 70-30 mix of oak and soybean hull. But
another question that I always ponder is, do you think that growing at altitude, like tailoring strains to the high altitude, is going to make a difference? So I've been, growing about 5 or 6 different shiitake strains. I can't find like the dream one. Maybe I'm just doing it bad. But then I had this idea in my head maybe to crossbreed a few different kinds to create this like high altitude strain. Do you think that is a factor? Like,
altitude for us, we always just viewed it as the challenge from a sterilization standpoint, right?
Yeah.
So we're at 8,200 feet, and water boils at 196 degrees Fahrenheit. Like, it never hits true, even atmospheric sterilization temps that you're trying to hit, right? And so that and scalability forced our hand into like the autoclave world, which took us forever to get online because we did it all ourselves, and it just like a lot of engineering meetings and just figuring out, making sure the boiler is paired right, and we had like a feeder system and how it all blends and works, and but being able to say, okay, now I know that that's not a variable, because you can get by. I'm pretty sure, especially where you're at with atmospheric sterilization, with probably some slightly increased risk of contamination, but we know we're another 1,000 feet higher than you, and it was just like it's got to be pressure or nothing. And the other part about altitude, less so than I think about like strains and whatnot, was just other systems conditioning, right? So before we were running a big autoclave in the facility, we didn't need to cool at all in the summer. Quite literally, like not one little bit, right? It was, the building was super well insulated and basically passively pulling air through it, 65 all day long.
Wow.
It was amazing.
That's
right?
like the dream temp.
Yeah, right? When it's just, that's the bane of the industry, is that it can be incredibly energy consumptive depending on where your region lies in it all, right? And then our biggest thing was, well, how to heat it in the winter, because we have days where it's -10, right? And we put in a radiant system into the slab, which if building from scratch, that's something that I will say I can't say enough about, because that much thermal mass, it gets hot, stays hot, right? And then you basically just adjust your humidity requirements as a result of the evaporation. Now, as we got bigger and the problems compound at that point, right?
Yeah.
It was like, okay, well, there's however many couple thousand bags, incubating, and then the boiler's running, even though that room's super well insulated, but even just the face of that door is just radiating heat. So we need to do something, because we were having blotch issues last year, and just like, strains that were underperforming, because even though they were incubating at like 68, 70 degrees, when we shifted to a 10-pound block, the dynamics of that block produces that much more heat. And so the mycelium, although it can be running fast, it's not doing exactly what we want it to do. So we finally switched this year. We put in 2 massive swamp cooling units, which in Colorado is perfect, right? Yeah. Because it brings the ambient temp or relative humidity in the barn from 35% or what it was, right, to 72%. So in the fruiting rooms, I have to use that much less water all summer. So you're preconditioning all the air as it's coming into the building. And that's been a game changer. It's so nice because the barn is cold. I mean, I'm middle of the summer, I'm wearing sweatshirts, long sleeve, I'm oh, this is kind of nice, and mushrooms are happier. So it's just, I feel like this game is always chasing your tail, right? Yeah. You're good at this one thing. You figured this out, right? You got your kings to pin nicely, and you got this going on. Then it's okay, I'm going to expand that to 200. And you're it doesn't actually do the same thing it did when it did 5 of them, Yeah. And so, I mean, that's, I think, the fun of it really, is that you're constantly learning. You get this one step, you feel good, it gives you enough confidence to make the next step, and you're just beaten down, right? And you're all right, well, I'm going to have to figure that one out, And,
cool.
And so I think that humans, and advancement is all about that, right? It's that struggle, right? And you're trying to play God to some degree, and there's awesome highs and there's definitely serious lows, but in the end, I'm happy that this is the path we've chosen, right? And mushrooms are delicious.
Absolutely. Cool. So I'm about to be making a big leap as far as space goes. What was that like for you guys when you had to make that jump into your new space?
Well, we're complete masochists. I mean, we built a house in Denver in 2012, and that kind of gave us the stones to take on a big project. And when we bought our land, I mean, there was no well, there was no electricity, it was raw land, right? So we moved a trailer up there. And we brought our shipping containers that we were fruiting out of in the city. And that was that story is long, but the shipping container model for us at the time, more so than anything, was we're beta testing, right? Mm-hmm. Is there a market in Denver? Can we sell to restaurants? Can we sell at the markets? How much can we produce out of X square footage? And then it was well, okay, if it works, then we can bring them up to the farm, right? Or bring them to a new place, or park them in a warehouse parking lot somewhere. And if it fails, we can sell the shipping containers, right? And there was much less I need to put all this investment dollars into this concrete space that may or may not work. And with real estate prices being what they are in Colorado, and also with the cannabis industry super inflating warehouse space, where if we wanted to run this operation in Kansas City, Missouri, we could have a 5-story warehouse, but is there a demographic in Kansas City, Missouri that's able to afford a higher value product and yada, yada, yada. And so Denver's a sweet spot, at least we've found, but the real estate was always going to be the issue. Mm-hmm. And so we had issues with a neighbor in the city that kind of forced our hand with the city and county of Denver, to have a new solution. And as much as I think that guy's a dick, he was very helpful in the farm's development, because it forced us to think fast and think big and that next step. And so when we moved up to our facility in Conifer, we moved a trailer up there. I got a well put in, and we dropped the electric, and we lived in a trailer and fruited out of shipping containers until we could start breaking ground on the facility. And then the facility, I'd say to completion, which we're still building on it and still working on improvements, that took us another 1.5 years, 2 years total. And then we lived in the mushroom barn. We cohabitated with the mushrooms. We were one. And then up until my wife was 9 months pregnant, we've been working on a house, which took us another 3+ years. And we moved into the house 3 weeks before my daughter was born. And now it's nice because I walk 100 yards down to work, and 100 yards up for lunch, and 100 yards down to finish the day, and 100 yards back.
Cool. So all that sacrifice paying off.
Oh, it feels great, especially having a little one and being able to be a part of her life versus having to drive to Denver or something like that to bring home the bacon. It was definitely a good balance. Liz, this is probably the first time in the farm's development where she hasn't been 100% side by side, but we've got bigger fish to fry right now, and kind of division of labor stuff. She does a lot of the back end stuff, email, accounting, inventory. Mm-hmm. It takes a village, as I'm sure once the business gets rolling, it's okay, there's a lot to actually think about, and there's a lot of stuff to take care of. And
that's definitely our secret, is Addie over there handles a lot of the administration and all the organizational things, and we wouldn't be where we are without that. So
we know farmers that are just one solo dude, right? And it's a monastic life, right? There is no chance to, if you're going to stay on top of your stuff, there is no way in hell you're actually going to be able to accomplish it all and have a reasonable life. So I think that, and that's kind of the history of farming, really. It's it was a partnership, whether it's family or husband, wife, and children, kind of brought into the mix, and that's the only way to really accomplish it. And then now in such a fast-paced world, where it's accounts payable stuff has to happen. We used to offer terms, which we no longer do, but it's just making sure invoices are generated same day, make sure it all happens fast and seamlessly. And granted, there's great tools to do that, but it still takes the actual physical power to manpower to do it. We're not fully robotic yet. It might be nice. I have a thought and then an email is sent. That sounds great.
But probably coming soon.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
But what's your vision for up here? This is a big leap for you guys from the city. And
so I guess our next step is building a Quonset. So we got blueprints over there. It's going to be a 30 by 50 foot metal steel structure, like a semicircle.
Mm-hmm.
And then I want to divide that out into 3 different fruiting chambers, and then do the front half as the lab and incubation, and then the back 10 feet will be processing and cold storage.
Nice.
But so I'm not planning to get ultra huge or anything. I really enjoy the direct to consumer approach that we have. Like, I love our customers, and it'd be a dream of mine to have like farm tours and like events and like little cookouts. Like, some of our customers are actually coming to dinner tonight. We had just had our final harvest, so I shut everything down, and
which feels glorious.
Yeah.
We're like 3-4 weeks away from that.
Yeah. And then I traded one of my neighbors. Oh, I got some venison. If you want to try some of this, but
nice.
So our neighbors down the hill gave us some of this venison jerky, but just getting like more of like a community aspect of growing mushrooms. Like, I love teaching classes, so that's kind of like my pivot in the winter. My friend Zach and I, we've been doing it for 3 years now, and that's gaining a lot of momentum. And then, so my dream is just, kind of like what you guys have, just walk down the hill, do the mushroom stuff, end the day. And I really want to get into like a tissue culture tree with mycorrhizal mushrooms and plant them everywhere. Like,
yeah, I mean,
if I could crack that, like, that would be a dream come true.
You crack that, then you can retire.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, my mind was blown this year. We do a lot in like the wild trade. We work with like a lot of circuit pickers that we've known for years, and these guys like live out of a van and they just end up where the mushrooms are, right? I mean, true commercial pickers. And, a lot of my guys were out here this year because it was such an epic year. I mean, this is probably the biggest bolete year in Colorado in the last 10 plus years. I think we did like a little over 6,000 pounds of porcini. It was just like a lot of boletes, And then it's like, and I always love that when it's a good year.
Yeah.
Because like at the end of the day, I'm done picking my mushrooms. I'm done doing this stuff. And then guys just roll in with baskets, and we're drinking beers, and we're grading stuff, and it's like you're hearing stories, and it's like, for me, it's such a far-fetched life from my life, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've got a relatively sedentary thing. I go out on a good year, I pick once a week,
Mm-hmm.
But guys that, they're literally like, oh, we're headed to the Yukon, the burns are good up there, and you're like, well, shit, man, that's a wild life, right?
Yeah.
And then it doesn't pop, right? And then they're there for 2 weeks just twiddling their thumbs, drinking beers, smoking pot, whatever, and then all of a sudden it pops and they're just picking, sun up to sundown, right? I find it fascinating. I feel like it's a single man sport, it's hard to imagine doing that with a family.
I get excited when I have like a little brown bag full of like Morels, and then this past spring I walked past a guy with 2 huge like pillowcases full, and I just like, like
next year.
Yeah. Like, my level of foraging is just, it's improving slowly, but I can't even imagine like people like that, or like the modern forager. He has like his maps all picked out, and
we buy the same maps. I think it's fascinating, the people that they've just carved out these little pockets of the industry. I
Mm-hmm.
I listened to Darren's Mushroom Hour podcast, and I some of the stuff with Mushroom Revival, and so I'm like inundated with it. I feel like when I'm in the barn, I'm like, it can be mushroom time, right?
Yeah.
We put on the podcast, or I actually just finished Entangled Life not too many months ago on Audible, and it's always good just to remind me, because I've got my tunnel vision, right? I got this year is like 600 CSA members, so you've got all that stuff to manage. We finally slimmed it down to 2 farmers markets, 1 day a week.
Yeah.
Because with the little one, and then I haven't had an actual weekend day off in 5 years, right?
Yeah.
In peak season, and it was like, nope, we're gonna CSAs. We're gonna do markets on Sunday, and we are going to work with some restaurants and some private chefs, and that's it. I think in the beginning, because there wasn't really like a paved route of how to do it.
Yeah.
We benchmarked a bunch of people within the industry, right? So, guys out in Cali are they're wholesaling at $8 a pound, right? And these guys, Hazel Dell, I mean, Jim Hammond, before he sold the business to, I think, his longest term employee, he, I think, was running $6-7 a pound wholesale, but he was also coming from running Dole Pineapple's mushroom division in California before he started his operation in '97, right? And so you're thinking about California agricultural scale to here, it's like you were thinking big. It's like big or nothing.
Yep.
And at a certain amount of volume of production, sure you can offer that, but I'm not trying to diss anybody, but I'm sure that there's a lot of people that are working there that aren't getting paid great, and it's you're able to do it because of the economy of scale, right? Yeah. So I was at first, Liz and I were like, well, we'll go $1 more a pound, and then we worked for years. We're in the best restaurants in Denver, all this stuff, and we're like, we are not making any money at all, right? This is a terrible model, right? We saw all these other examples. We're like, we're going to do that, but maybe just a little bit more. And, at the end of the year, we're like, we're sharing a teacher's salary. This is not going to work. And so instead of throwing in the towel, it was like, well, let's just get smarter, right? And like, can we capture more direct-to-consumer sales? Can we do it all and also like be equitable in the way that we operate, in the sense that like, I've never tried to poach any of your business, or I've never tried to poach any of Hazel Dell's business. I've never tried to step on anybody's toes and just say, we're going to carve out this little piece of the pie for us, right? And then there's plenty of pie around, right? And can we do that in this, like, as I've gotten more of a non-competitive model, right? Yeah. Because if you're like focused on the next guy who's coming up, because there's going to be a bunch of people that we're both going to see, that start. If your mindset gets stuck on the, let me get that, then it's a terrible way to feel, a terrible way to develop, right?
And I feel like it's a waste of energy too, because you're like focusing on the wrong things,
right? Yeah. It's like a famine mentality, right? Yep. And versus like a feasting mentality, right? And when there's a level of abundance, you take what you need, but you don't have to conquer the world, kind of thing. Yep. And I think for me, that's also come a lot with like age and just mellowing out a little bit, and also just seeing how as the market responds. Like, I don't know the people that started Fox Fungi, but they think they're doing the City Park Farmers Market. They're doing the Parker Farmers Market, which we used to do, and then there's like, I don't know, the guys at Denver Mushroom Company. I think they're doing the Union Station slot that we used to have, and I'm like, cool, right? In the end, I'm like, this is probably good for all of us, to be perfectly honest, right?
I agree. It's like, so my vision, I guess, is like this just fully like vertical integration. So I'm breeding my own strains, I'm doing my own spawn, and then I'm creating my own fruiting blocks within house, so that keeps like my margins good. And then as far as, like you said, the market in Denver, like there's so many people who have become more like friends and family that we serve, that I don't ever feel like I have to go out to other farmers markets and, try to like use my energy to stretch farther and farther. Like, it's not like a wise thing from my perspective, and it's easy to fall into that trap. But I think, at one point I had the vision to like go big and grow as many mushrooms as possible, and then I think my wife kind of talked me down, and like now we have this really like, it's like a healthy like work-life balance, I guess.
Well, I mean, the thing about capitalism is we're kind of bred to be like, I want it all, right? And like, for what, right? At the end, it's like, can you think smarter? And for me, with our business, like having the diversification between, we have the fresh product, that we produce, we work with pickers and pick ourselves when we have a good season, And then now we're shifting more to the back end production, right? So, I mean, this last year we did like a design build for a couple shipping containers for a farm up in Vale. Cool. And we're working more like in that model, and then like setting people up so that like we could build you out a shipping container and fill that with blocks, right? And it could be like a supplementary part of your farm income, right? Let's just say you diversify, you're in microgreens, you're in this, that, and the other. And then here's this other thing that you can just like kind of tack on to the deal where you already have people working at the farm, you already have, an interest in agriculture. Mushrooms are definitely like de moda, it's culturally relevant at this point in time. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, yeah, you get a couple hundred, oyster blocks in there that are going to pump out 2+ pounds a block. And then you have that much more as a offering for your CSA or for your farmer's market stand. And so kind of working more in that like building alliances and also building, like using the infrastructure that we've invested in to be able to help support other operations, kind of gain a little traction, right? Yep. And then if that person's like, oh man, I really like the back end of it, then allowing them to develop that or helping them with some of the kind of the greater ideas that come into that. But as I've kind of seen from what I view as to some degree, certainly your market demographic, is like the hobbyist world is growing in leaps and bounds, right? I mean, you look at the mushroom growing Facebook page; it's like 130,000 members or something like that.
Yeah.
That means that there's 130,000 people that have gone, I want to grow a mushroom, and you got to imagine it's way more than that, right? It's just that's one little channel of it, and so I think it's fascinating to be a part of a rising tide, and then just kind of figuring out, okay, well, what part of it do I actually like the best, or what part of it am I best at? And I've always been more of like a tinker build, like I like wrenching on pipes, I like welding, I like all the things that go into like the greater manufacturing of it.
Yep.
Right? And then, I mean, what I get from you, and obviously we haven't talked that much, but it's like you have a lot more of that background, microbial science, and like that part of it really fits well with your personality and your interests and desires. And it's like it takes a village to make the whole thing work, right?
So everyone kind of gravitates towards their niche.
Yeah.
And then
not unlike mushrooms, right?
Yeah.
In the environment, right? You find your little sweet spot. Like, this is giving me energy.
Yep.
This is a great food source.
Cool.
Yeah. So, yeah, no, we're pumped, and it's cool that I think at this point in the game, what is possible in the next 5 or 10 years, it's just like neither you nor I could predict it. I mean, we're part of the American Mushroom Institute and the Mushroom Council, and they're like, they've predicted, growth in mushroom sales by X and X and X, and then all of a sudden it was just like, pretty much when we started as a commercial operation, just full J curve, right?
Wow.
They're just like, well, we didn't see this coming, and now, they look at us, you, me, the smaller producers as this like craft mushroom industry.
Yeah.
Like there's like a true name for us, right? And we're emerging as that craft mushroom industry, and it's cool to be a part of something that wasn't done before. You're not totally replicating a model that's been around for thousands of years per se. It's like, no, I mean, it went from pasteurizing in straw is the only way for a small farm to do it, right? To then we had a fleet of all Americans, and then it was like, well, we could put sauna steamers into 55-gallon drums, and so long as we're not trying to seal them up, we won't blow ourselves up and die. Yeah. And then it's like, then the PIDs, then this, like, so it's cool just in a short period of time just to watch the efficiencies grow, and then, the kids that get into mushrooms in 10 years will be like, oh, autoclaves, we do it, and some sort of space age shit, you know what I mean? Like, at least that's how I see it.
Do you guys do any passive fruiting, like outdoors?
I mean, we have had like tents and stuff like that, the bugs get to them.
Yeah.
And then in a state like Colorado, I mean, just the relative humidity is working against you.
Yeah.
So we've had, we'll put a hydrofogger out in a tent and that. But, what we have found is that bears are not really interested in them.
Yes.
It's a good thing moving to the mountains.
I saw a bear in that pond the other day. It was, I went out with some coffee and it just made eye contact with me. I was like, oh man. And I went in to get my phone. And then by the time I left, it was like all the way up the hill, and there was the footprints, and all the water was gone.
Yeah.
So like we reached out to the old owner, and we were like, yeah, we just we saw the bear. It was like our first. It was like our first time when we were moving our furniture in, and then he's like, yeah, like I always wondered. He thought there was a hole in the pond. He's like, I have never seen the bear, but every time I come home from work, the water would be gone. So it was like that was the wake up call. Like, wow, we're in the mountains.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a game changer, And
have you had any break-ins with animals or?
The biggest issue is rodents.
Oh man, the chipmunks. There's gotta be some over in that shed right there.
I'd say for us more like voles and different types of mice. I mean, we're on like full blown kill zone right now because it's right in that shoulder season where it's bad, right? Where it's warm on 2 days out of the week and then it's cold the next 3 days out of the week, and so for the most part, they'll go after a freshly sterilized bag of grain. They won't necessarily go after fully colonized spawn. But then you spawn into a production block, and we've had batches where, like, I don't know if the mice have mutated to realize they're the food source, but it's just burrowing through blocks. You're like, that just cost me $1,000,
My God.
And so when
cats.
So when we lived in the barn, we have 2 cats: Yamabushitaki, which is lion's mane, and Matsutaki. Wow. Right, the 2 takis. Collectively, they're my takis, but yeah. So they lived in the barn and they just ran game, right? I mean, it was just slaycation all day. But as we moved to the house, then it was like, oh, they're starting to emerge again. So we've got booby traps and all sorts of stuff. And then it mellows out once it gets cold. It's like kill what's in there and then move forward. But yeah, they definitely give you a run for your money. That was one thing, probably the biggest thing, unknown. We put in an apple orchard of the 100 cider apple varieties. And I'd say right now we've probably got about 30 that are still surviving. But vole damage, they come in when the snow drifts get high, they'll girdle trees.
Wow.
So it's forced us to get a little smarter. We're actually shifting into raspberry production.
All right.
High altitude, zone 3 tolerant raspberry species, because basically if a vole comes in and chews them back, it's just pruning, right? I mean, the apple trees, when they're getting set those first couple of years, it's super important that they're able to thrive. And so we've had, that's probably our biggest hurdle, I would say, that we did not anticipate, is you come into forested area which seems abundant in resources, but still it's trying to house a lot of critters, and you come in, they're like, that's great habitat. Man, do you see that guy? He got 2 pallets worth of millet. Oh man, we can live here forever. So that's something to be mindful of, but it can be mitigated.
What is your strategy for spent blocks then? Do you have a whole separate area that you do that, or? We
just have a massive compost pile.
Yeah.
And because we turn it so frequently, we put all of our household refuse in there, and no bear activity. I mean, I'm trying to figure out exactly a number, but probably 30, 35 tons of spent blocks a year, right?
Wow.
And it's great volumetrically. It just starts off massive and just by the spring, it's this real manageable thing. We go spread it in the garden.
Wow.
And yeah, so it's been
that's like a gold mine then. How much acres do you guys have?
So that was one of the biggest things that pushed us into the mountains. We ended up with more acres than we ever thought we would need. But we have 35 acres. The zoning is in Jefferson County, so Zone 2 is 35 to 100. And at that point, it's like carte blanche. Like we could put in a poultry operation with 1,000 chickens, and I think maybe we were a little bit sensitive to it because we had that shitty neighbor in the city.
Yeah.
And really what it came down to was a zoning issue. The city didn't really care if nobody else cared. But because somebody cared, then it would go down to zoning. They go, oh, well, that's not a permitted use, or the shipping containers aren't a permitted structure. And then so when we were looking for property, we were like, okay, no HOAs, no non-agriculturally zoned land.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, we were looking at certain properties where for like 3 acres, the price differential to get 35 was like $40,000 or something like that. And we're like, well, if I see this for the long haul, maybe this, and we fell in love with this particular parcel. We're like, and it had a well that actually offered water rights, and it had all these things that like we were like, this is a dream. We're kind of in this valley, although the top of the property goes out and you can see the Continental Divide in Denver, and I mean it's nice. Cool. But the biggest thing was the water and the zoning, and it was this like, as much as I love my neighbors, if they're like, I don't like that you built that building there, and I don't like that, and I could be like, I also don't like that perspective, and I can do whatever I want. It's
freedom.
Exactly. Because, as we all will find, America's freedom ain't free. Well, it's certainly not if you've got a bunch of neighbors breathing down your neck, and so I think, too, because we've tastefully done it and we've done it ourselves, I think we've earned a lot of cred from the neighbors. Mm-hmm. Where in the very beginning, I think they were like, well, these people are living in a trailer. They just have 2 outlets and a well. We're worried about them, and now we're like, oh, we actually live in a house and we have multiple flushing toilets, and we've made it. So it feels good. And this next year, we're super excited. We got a project in the pipeline. We put in a 30 by 48 foot high tunnel greenhouse.
Wow.
And we're doing the 3 sisters, so corn, beans, and squash, but we're hoping to parasitize all the corn with wheat lacoche.
Cool.
So doing like massive amounts of liquid culture, coming in with like backpack sprayers and hosing the whole
That's
place
what
down.
I always imagine.
Yeah. And I know some people down in Colorado along the Arkansas that have done it in open fields and actually had pretty good success of parasitization. So, there's a couple folks that have done it, and the craziest thing is Denver's food scene isn't quite as developed, I think, as a lot of other big cities. Mm-hmm. So most likely the product will be shipped out of state because there.
Want to know the weird thing that I noticed from the pandemic though is that a lot of these like cookie cutter like chain restaurants went under, and that's leaving this void for all these like exquisite restaurants to fill that gap. So I feel like it's coming. Yeah. And there was like always this blockade. Like I come from Buffalo, New York, where every single street had like a family-owned Italian restaurant and like a family-owned pizza place. And then we moved out here, and it's like just, chain restaurant. And now all that got flattened. And I feel like there's room for all these new restaurants to start to grow. So I feel like in the next 5 to 10 years, we might see that boom. And that's cool that you could have. Yeah,
it'd be great if there was a corn smut market here in Denver. I know some buyers out on the West Coast that I could move it to. But it'd be great. And for more than anything, it's just like you have your experiments with some of the wilds and whatnot. For me, it's like
I have another one. So this company in Missouri sent me this Morel kit. So if you have any room in your tunnel, it comes with like directions and Oh yeah, you can take this with you.
Man.
It's like this little Morel pouch. And last spring I did something similar, and I got some pins, but they dried out. But I feel like if you have this huge pine tunnel and lots of veggies, that you can maintain the humidity.
Well, that was kind of the biggest thing for us, because in Colorado, the relative humidity is so low that even if you open sprayed with the liquid culture, the success rate has got to be minimized by quite a large degree, and being able to truly control, keep it hot, keep it moist.
Yep.
I think that we could have a large rate of success. And for me, more than anything, it's just it's a fun project.
Yeah.
And if not, we'll be eating a shit ton of sweet corn. Right?
Yeah.
But hey, there could be worse problems.
Yeah, not a bad plan B.
Yeah.
Yeah. So are there trials that have been done and documented then, where people will spray corn with the corn smut? Or does it have to be spores or liquid culture?
So I have a friend out in Wisconsin. He's got a company doing it that we've worked with over the years, and he has been having great success in open fields, but also much higher relative humidity in the Midwest.
I see.
And but yeah, no, it can definitely be done. As far as exactly how people are doing it, I think there's still a little bit of that proprietary whatever knowledge that comes with it. But at the same time, I mean, you and I both know it's you get a big vat of liquid culture going, right? It's so long as it's there. I mean, the whole thing is corn smut can emerge in the environment without any coaxing, right? Yep. So if you're I'm creating a perfect environment for it, and I'm just going to hose the place down, right? Yep. I have a feeling that I'll never be able to grow sweet corn without it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just you're stuck with it. Smut or nothing,
Cool.
But yeah, and then we're trying to work with some grad students at CSU. It's another big thing we're working on this winter. We had a lot of actual logging done on our property as part of a National Resource Conservation Service grant, and part of the logging operation, we've actually worked. Jeff Ravage, that was actually highlighted in that book, In Search of Mycotopia. Mm-hmm. We were doing the back end sterilization for the bulk substrate for them, and they're using native mushroom species to break down woody debris. And for us, after participating in a project like this, most of the property was done in what's called lop and scatter, where they just cut down pieces of slash into small pieces, just no higher than a knee high. Mm-hmm. And then most of the larger logs are removed. But there was still some areas that were masticated, and then there's been areas where whole properties were masticated, and the property doesn't rebound like people want it to, right? Because the wood depth is so deep that the first things that emerge are Canadian thistle and these other kind of noxious weeds. Now, whether over the course of 20 years it recovers just fine, who knows? But even just from a homeowner's aesthetic, not to mention water retention, soil building properties. We want to work with a couple of soil scientists at CSU to try to document masticated woody debris decomposition. And so when people do have a property masticated and this stuff's sticking around for a long time, can we use native mushrooms to bring it back to life that much faster? And finding value in that, and just soil tilth and soil health. And so, yeah, there's a lot of fun things that are in the pipeline for us, and more so than anything, we're just trying to beef up the back end production. We'll max out. I mean, we're pretty much there. We'll probably maybe max out another 20% in fresh mushrooms that we produce. Mm-hmm. But having blocks available and having local spawn available and having that for the next generation of people that are coming up that want to tinker around before they make the delve into all the infrastructure and investment to do it themselves, or maybe they never get to there, right? They just like to fruit the mushrooms. And definitely takes a whole lot of variables out of it, right?
Yeah, nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, if it's ready to go, right? And there's plenty that can go wrong in fruiting.
Yep.
So if you just specialize, you say I'm really good at fruiting mushrooms.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can make money doing that.
Yep.
And just kind of being there as some training wheels and just help, and it allows us. I mean, we do primarily one cook a week, but we're looking to do about 750 10-pound blocks a week, and that's it. I don't want to build another facility. I don't want to go beyond that realm, but that's about where I think both Liz and I see it stopping, and that's a lot of work. That's
a lot for me.
That's like 4 full-timers, to do it at that level.
Cool.
And then having market help, and fortunately over the years, market help's always been friends, where it was like a passion project. They had a good job, and they just wanted to go out on the weekends and sling mushrooms and have some beers at the end of the day. So
cool.
We've been very lucky in that regard, but bring it to that next level of operational efficiency, and I'll finally have to write up my standard operating practices that I've been putting off for years. It's like, this is what we do on Monday, this is what we do on Tuesday.
Yep.
And it's all in my head for the most part now, and anybody who works with us, they know roughly what we're doing on any given week. But having at that point where I end up falling more into like a managerial role, which is never something I've ever truly dreamt of that being my passion, but at this point, seeing where I think the business needs to go, and knowing that my skill set at this point isn't in like the everyday grind that I've done for so long, that now it's like, can I help show all these people how to do it themselves, right? And if they go off to start their own mushroom farm, great, Cool. And I'm sure you get tons of emails of people that, hey, do you need help? And so it's finally hit.
At least like once a week, someone calls me.
Yeah.
And I would love to help you out if you're out there, but we're just not there yet.
Right.
We're still building, but backpedaling a little bit. So we have that scrub oak patch where I'm gonna clear to put the Quonset. My plan was to mulch it and then bury it. What type of mushroom would you grow in a giant pile of mulch? Scrub oak.
It's a true quercus, it's the only oak we have in the state, right?
Yeah.
So you could grow just about anything you want, right? That was always something that I thought, as far as the feasibility of it, I don't think the money's there yet. Mm-hmm. But scrub oak is becoming like another nuisance, basically, as areas get cut back from a forestry standpoint. Mm-hmm. A lot of times scrub oak becomes a successionary species, and it can grow incredibly dense because it's something that's wiped out during the wildland fires that would roll through every 15 to 20 years in our landscape. And so without that fire, it can get kind of out of control, true thickets of scrub oak. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people want to get it removed, and wouldn't it be cool if you came in and said, we'll mow it down and then we'll grow mushrooms on that spent substrate, Yep. Liz and I have always had like a hard on for that idea, but as crunching the numbers, it's like the economics don't quite make sense, but that could change.
Yeah, if we're going to clear it anyway.
Well, yeah, exactly.
It'd be a cool experiment.
Or if your neighbor's doing it, be like, don't throw that away. We'll take the pile.
Yeah.
And it's definitely ideal substrate in my mind. I think the only issue on a large scale too is that it's so scrubby, right?
Yeah.
It's not this big dense tree. Like you'd have to chip a huge amount of it to really have large enough pile of substrate to really work from. But from a hobbyist cool experiment thing, sure. I think you do cool stuff and grow anything that you're currently growing on that substrate.
Yeah, I'm thinking Piapino.
Nice.
Yeah, that's my favorite, but for outdoor at least, I feel like it holds its texture really well and the dryness.
Yeah. No, I've always been a big fan of them. I actually really like them dried, and we make a lot of mushroom powders, and something that we've used forever in our cooking, because when you first start growing, you got a lot of extra mushrooms you don't have a home for. You're like, well, what do I do with this? So we would always grind it down, rub it on steaks, put it in as like a quick mushroom broth. Mm-hmm. But the POs, I mean, they're one that I think has that nuttiness that really intensifies in the drying process. But from a rehydration standpoint, I don't think it's very good. Like it's just like on its own. But when it's in that powder form, right? I mean, I think it's like packed with umami. It's a delicious one, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good fresh too, but
very addicting.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's such a beautiful. Like you get a good pin set on them, it's robust, you know, and it's one that for us has grown leaps and bounds over the years as far as popularity. I mean, say like that, you know, chestnuts, especially lion's mane. I mean, when we first grew lion's mane, people are like, I don't know what the hell to do with that, you know? And then thank you, Joe Rogan, for telling the population it's like, oh yeah, lion's mane's pretty good stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so
we do the crab cake, like the imitation crab cake, I guess. Phenomenal.
Oh yeah, we do it all the time. I mean, I think in the very beginning, I just threw it out there because Stammet said, you know, it tastes like crab. I'm from Maryland. I'm like, any excuse to use Old Bay. Yeah. You know, right? You know, so I was like, we're going to mix it all together. It's going to be great, you know. And ForagerChef.com, he's got a good recipe for it. I think that when I push people to a good baseline crab cake recipe, I push them to that one because I think the product is really good, what you end up coming out with. And, you know, that's always so funny to me, too, because I've always been like a wing it chef, right? Yep. I'm like, I got some Cheetos. I got this. I'm like, throwing it all together. And so many of our clients are like, do you have a recipe list? And I was like, I've got the internet, you know, and I've got what I think is going to taste good. And so it's nice when somebody like Forager Chef or somebody, you know, who's focusing on mushrooms and recipes, I'm like, go on their website and just scroll through it.
Yes.
You know, they've put energy into this, right? I've just made the mushrooms for you. You
know?
But yeah, no, it's everybody's got their forte, as we were discussing earlier. It's like the culinary, like the gastronomique side of it all. Like we have got a guy that's worked with us for years. Big shout out to you, Roger. He's, you know, sommelier training. He's got all the stuff that, like, you know, people, a lot of our clients want, you know, like, well, what would this pair well with? Yep. You know, I'm like, a steak, you know, have you tried a risotto? You know, but I obviously, you know, like fine dining and whatnot, but I'm not sous vide my food and I'm not doing these, you know, culinary practices, and Roger's great at that, and he's moving to Manhattan in January, so we're going to be at a loss, so if you're the next sommelier food person that Mile High Fungi needs, send your resume. So,
cool. You guys got, what, 3 more weeks left in your market?
So South Pearl runs 2 more weeks on Sunday. Our CSA is all finish up, I think, first week of December. But basically, you know, we're finishing up the shiitake, maitake, and then the oysters go quicker. You know, obviously, you know, those are turn and burn, you know. Yeah.
Still amazes me because I shut down like a week earlier every year, and I'm still getting massive mushrooms at the end.
Yeah.
So it's like...
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, you know, dry them, I see your freeze drying stuff, right? And I think that's a cool frontier to push it. Just, I think aesthetically they look great. And,
yes.
You know, I haven't. Maybe I'll pick some up from you. I haven't tried them side by side as far as like what they're like to work with after the fact.
Yeah.
You know?
So I think flavors there, the texture is there for some of them, but some the texture kind of is like dried.
Gotcha.
Yep. Yeah. But I think that it preserves, like, especially, so chanterelles were always, for me, like, notoriously, you can't dry them. They're too tough, and then they just aren't the same. But a freeze-dried chanterelle compared to a fresh chanterelle is, like, very similar.
Nice.
It's pretty crazy.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, so, obviously, that's the one nice thing about us versus, I mean, obviously, if you're a cucumber farmer, you can make pickles, right? You know?
Yeah,
but
yes,
but it's nice to be able to say it's preserved. It will probably last indefinitely, but we'll move it within a year. You know, and I don't know how many dried pounds of porcini we have, but it's insane still. It's like another 50, 60 pounds of dried porcini. But, we make porcini powder with it. It's like, and it's one of those mushrooms that for me in the wintertime, whether it's like pasta sauces, quick broths, just like if I'm going to add like a real punch to it, porcini carries its weight.
Oh, yeah.
And so not a bad thing to be rich in dried porcini, right?
Absolutely. Did you guys ever find any on your property? What kind of trees do you have?
So we have Engelmann spruce, and I'm pretty sure that's that's its main partner in Colorado. When we go out picking, we're looking for big patches of Engelmann. But it was funny. We were out clearing some woody debris off the creek as part of this forestry project. They won't go within 50 feet of a riparian zone, and we've got a year-round creek that runs through the property. And so there's some bigger piles of wood that I was trying just to get kind of up into the project. And I was on CMS Facebook page, and people are like finding porcini really low. We always look 10, 10.5, 11,000. That's where we're going to go pick. We're at 8,500, and we're working up the creek, and it was raining, and I was like, that'd be sweet. We always joked about like, are we too low? Like, because I've thought about doing experiments too, where I'm like, trying to encourage it because I know we have some of the same partner tree species. I'm like throwing a log, and I'm like, no shit, and then all of a sudden we're like finding patches, and we're like, oh shit, and so I remember
adrenaline rush.
Yeah, it was great. Because we get scabers all the time because there's a lot of aspens that run through there, so you get the aspen boletes. And
what are your thoughts on edibility of those?
I've personally never had a problem with them.
All right.
I know that alcohol can affect people's response to them, and that's true of a lot of mushrooms. Like I say, morels can be like that too for people. Like they're fine eating them, and then they're drinking and eating them, and then they get sick. So. It's the thing with mushrooms in general. I think I read something that was like 10% of the population's allergic to oysters or something.
Wow.
It's whether or not we can quantify it at that level, who knows? But everybody's body is different. I have friends that put mango in their mouth, it gets itchy. And we're our own little microbiome within this greater macrobiome, and so. I can imagine. They're like commonly sold in places in Europe, like Verpas, right? Like a false morel, right? Mm-hmm. All throughout Eastern Europe, Verpa bohemica. That's commonly sold. It's like on par with morel, and now in Colorado, it's like no way. Don't, you see a Verpa, that's a false morel. Don't touch it. Never eat it. Yep. The gyrometras are the ones that have more potential issues for people. But still, it's like I think it's such a personal thing, we always just tell people, you're out in the woods, you find a bolete, it doesn't stain, it's not a blue staining bolete, you're fine to eat it, whether or not it's a great culinary mushroom, right, or not. This is the first year we really came up on Boletus barrousii, which I think are delicious. The white kings, you're just harder to find. And then, but there's so many different mushroom species, and there's just so many different nuances. I always tell people thoroughly cook any wilds, and in general, we say all mushrooms should be cooked. Mm-hmm. It's just kind of a baseliner. Whether or not people do that, I know people do eat some of our mushrooms raw, and I'm like, well, that's your own choice. And it's not that I think that you're going to get sick, but you're not getting much out of it, right? The digestibility, it's like. It's like passing cardboard or something through your body. It's like, well, I just have a hard time breaking it down without a little heat, But at the same time, everybody's journey, they can do what they want. But the scabers, they're ones that if I think that there's porcini around, I'm not going to pick them. And they don't grow in the same environment per se, Mm-hmm. They can grow close, but the aspen boletes are usually in the aspens, and then the bigger boletes are in the spruce, and so it's just one of those things. Like I'll eat them. I'll eat lots of things other people won't eat. Mm-hmm. Like that's one of my favorite parts of travel. It's just like go someplace and just like that looks weird. Let's give it a shot. We were in Iceland and I was eating like the fermented Greenland shark. Wow. I was just like, this shit is disgusting. But my wife's like, yeah, and that's all you. Don't kiss me.
Yeah. Cool.
But yeah, no.
All right. Well, I think we can start wrapping it up. Is there? So you said you might be hiring soon. Is there any place that you prefer to have people reach out to you?
Sending an email to michael@milehighfungi.com or info@milehighfungi.com is always a good way. We'll get that. We'll be hiring in spring as we're kind of ramping up the next stages of our production. But yeah, we're trying to stay relevant, putting out some content here and there. If you want lots of content, obviously.
Well, I appreciate you coming out here, and it was a great conversation. And 2 weeks left at South Pearl Street, and I guess the CSAs are done. But if you want any really good mushrooms, check out Mile High. If you miss us,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I'm looking forward to more conversations in the future. So cheers.
Cheers, yeah.
Cheers to that.
I think we're ready for another one.
Yeah.
All right.
Until next time, much love.